What's up, guys? Back with another video here on new 10th edition stuff. Because a lot of people saw, maybe some of you didn't, there was a major leak of most of the core rulebook, at least the rules parts of it yesterday. So I'm going to just do a rundown of the major changes. I'm not going to go through every single thing in the book. This is just basically going to be the things that are going to be different from 9th edition. So those of you who have played 9th edition, this will be good for you. Those of you who are just getting in at 10th, then some of this really won't make much of a difference to you because it's all going to be new to you. But so I'm just going to dive into some of this. So as we've all heard, there's no psychic phase, just psychic abilities either are rules on your data sheet or shooting attacks, or I don't know if I've seen any psychic combat attacks other than like force staves and stuff get like the psychic keyword on their attacks, but there may be some actual psychic combat attacks, but we'll see. For coherency, it used to be if you had 6 models or more, you had to have at least 2 models within range for coherency. They upped that to 7 models. I guess that's because a lot of the Primaris units and stuff have 6 model units, so that you don't have to worry about that. You have to actually get to 7 models, but then other than that, it still works the same. There's no longer morale. There's now battle shock, which doesn't happen at the end of the phase. It happens at the end of the turn. It happens at the end of your command phase. And now you have to roll over your leadership instead of under your leadership. And if you fail, your objective control goes to 0. If you fall back out of combat, you have to take a desperate breakout check, basically. And so basically, you roll a dice for each model in the unit. And on a 1 or a 2, you lose that model. And then you can't use strats on the unit. I guess objective control, should go over that. That's instead of objective secured on troops. And now you have each model has an objective control number, and just whoever has the most objective control on an objective controls it. Characters, now a lot of them have the leader keyword, which means they can join units, which is the only way they get protection now. And if the unit's destroyed, then the character becomes their own unit. They can't join other units. And if you, I don't know what the secondaries are, but say you got a point for every unit you killed. If you killed the bodyguard unit and then the character, it would count as 2 separate kills. The lone operative is what some of the bigger characters get, and stuff like assassins that can't join units, which means if you're outside 12 inches, you can't shoot them. So it's no longer closest. And some of them will only get it if they're within range of certain units. And that will be described on their battle sheets. So that's just, there's no lookout serve. There's lone operative on certain models, and the other ones have to join units to get protection from the unit. Let's see what else here. In the movement phase, you can move through your own models now. So no more worrying about someone rolling low on their advance and holding up units behind them, or having to worry about which order you move stuff. The only exception to this is monsters and vehicles cannot move through other monster and vehicles. Infantry and stuff can move around monster and vehicles. Monster and vehicles can move around infantry. Just monsters and vehicles cannot move around each other. Through each other. They can move around each other. Whenever this so it's called Desperate Escape, not Desperate Breakout. But if you fall back and you were tri-pointed, for those of you who know what that is, like basically if you couldn't fall back without moving over any models, each model in your unit that has to do that, roll a dice for them. On a 1 or a 2, that model is destroyed. And it's not a strat, it's just something that every unit can do now, so there's no more tying up models, except maybe something like a drop pod that has no movement. You might still be able to lock in combat like that, but for the most part, stuff can just fall back over you. But you force them to have to possibly use models, so it's still worth doing. It's just not as strong as it was, especially 2 editions ago, because this edition we had the stratagem to get out of it. But they just want that gone, it looks like. Flying units, instead of measuring straight like this to move up onto a building or something, you now have to measure their distance like this, so they will lose a little bit of movement when going up and down, instead of just measuring 12 over whatever the move was and just going from the bottom floor to 12 inches up in the air and not paying for that at all. So you now have to measure for them. You measure the angle of what their movement is. Vehicles have firing decks now, so those of you who played like open top transports, that doesn't change too much for you. You just have a certain number of models you can shoot out of it. Normally is the same as the amount of models it can hold, but stuff like rhinos and stuff like that will have a couple firing points, so you can shoot meltas or a las cannon or something out of them if you wanted to. All right, and so now if the transport you're in has exploded, you still have to roll a dice for every model in the unit, but for every one you roll now, it's just 1 mortal wound, not a model destroyed. So for single model units, nothing changes, but for multi-model units, it's actually more helpful. You are less likely to lose a bunch of models. If your vehicle is destroyed, you are battle shocked until your unit's battle shocked until your next command phase, and they can't charge and count as having made a move. And then if you have to emergency disembark, that is it's on a 1 to a 3. You fail, but it's just a mortal wound. So once again, on single wound units, this is going to be much worse. On multi-wound units, this is actually a little better. But the big thing out of this is the battle shocked. You're auto battle shocked. So used to be, man, they got a transport with 5 OBSEC troops in it. I don't want to kill it because they'll take the objective. Well, now you kill it, they drop out, they're battle shocked. They don't have any objective control on an objective. So it's going to be easier to take the point objectives from a transport, even if it's got models inside it, because until their player's next turn, it doesn't count. Although, if you think about it, all right, it's not as good as I was thinking, because if you kill it on your turn, on their command phase, they're going to come back and control it, so they would still have it for their turn. So I guess if you somehow kill a transport in the controlling player's turn, then it's a little better, because you can, so you could heroic into it or something, then you can control it on your turn, even though they have models there. My first thought was they're not going to get that objective at all, but that battle shock will go away as soon as it activates their turn. So if you kill it on your turn, it's not as good unless you have, for some reason, something that benefits you for controlling the objective at the end of your turn. And then what else do we have here? We did the emergency, right? Monsters and vehicles. Oh, combat. Monsters and vehicles can shoot out of combat and be shot while they're in combat. It's just there's going to be a -1 penalty for them to shoot out and for them to be shot. So that's a huge change. You can't charge knights and stuff into combat and have them protective if the unit couldn't fall back, although now falling back is a lot easier. And now units don't have to fall back, so you have a good combat unit in with a vehicle. You used to have to fall back with it so you could shoot it. Now you can shoot it and still leave the combat unit there in case you fail, or if you do destroy the unit, and I mean they'll risk taking the explosion damage when it blows up, but they'll be in range to charge what was inside it. So that's a big change. I'm sure it'll come up in a lot of situations where not having to fall back and be able to stay in and still shoot and destroy the unit will be key. And now charges. When you make a charge, you now must move closer to the enemy models that you charged, and you must end in base-to-base contact if you had the movement to do so. So no more intentionally staying just 1 inch away because I'm going to attack this thing and then consolidate this way. So now didn't get to heroic, but now you can't attack, so that's going to be a lot harder to do. I'm sure there will be situations where you can pull it off, but it's going to be harder to do. What else? Oh, and so the fact that you used to be able to make a charge, so you rolled 10 inches. You move the first guy in, and then you string them out to an objective, moving away from the charging units. Now, you could still try to do that, but every model must end closer to one of the units you declared the charge against. So you don't have as much free reign with that, so you have to set it up a little more carefully. Same with pile-ins now. You have to pile towards the enemy, and you have to get in base-to-base contact if possible. And consolidation. You can only consolidate if you end in engagement range. And you have to get in base-to-base possible. And there's the only stipulation that is if there are no enemy units that you can get into engagement range with. If your 3-inch pile-in, or if your 3-inch consolidate will allow you to get onto and control an objective marker, you can do it. But if your pile-in won't get you an engagement range and won't get you onto an objective marker, you actually don't get to do your consolidate. I keep calling it pile-in. You won't get to do your consolidate. So that, a lot of people probably will forget that, but you basically won't always get that 3 inches of movement. And now fighting is, you can fight if you're within an inch, but to fight through people, you have to be within base to base. In a model with basically a model in base to base can have another model in base to base with him fight through. So you basically have to get into base to base with your first guy, and your second guy has to be in base to base with your first guy to have both of them swing into a unit. So it's gonna just something we'll adjust to it quickly, just like we adjusted to the ½ inch within a ½ inch this edition. But it will be something to consider, and that little bit of a will cost you a couple models here and there occasionally. All right. And then we got, and this is big. In the fight phase, last edition it was, the first step was chargers and fight first, and whoever's turn it was got to choose first there. And then in the second round, ongoing combats, your opponent got to choose. Now, if you charge, if your opponent has fight first as well, say they have Slaanesh or something like that, they will get to choose the first unit, even though it's your turn and you charged. And then they still get to choose first in the second phase. So your opponent, if it's your turn, your opponent gets to choose the first unit in both steps. Now, if they have no fight first in their army and you charge, then it works the same way. You do all charging and fight first, and if they don't have any, then you get to do all yours, and then so the only time it's really going to be different is if they have fight first and you charge into them, they will actually get the first activation. Strategic Reserve for Strike Force 2,000 point missions is going to be 500 points. It's going to be 25% of whatever the battle size is. Strike Force is 2,000. And that's so only up to 500 points at Strike Force level can go into Strategic Reserves. And Strategic Reserve turn 2. Can't come in turn 1, turn 2, still the same restrictions. You can't come in the opponent's deployment zone. But on turn 3, you can actually come in off any table edge. Used to be restricted, not able to come in off your opponent's table edge. That is now gone. Starting turn 3, you can come in off any of the table edges, and there's no stipulation saying you have to be in by the end of turn 3. It's possible some mission packets may add that, but currently that is not in the main rules. And it says you can only have up to 500 points or 25% of your army in Strategic Reserve, but it does not say Total Reserve. So I haven't seen a restriction anywhere else on how many units in total you can have reserve. I don't know if that's an oversight or if that's intentional, but currently looks like you could technically put your whole army in reserve. I'm sure there will be some tournament pack restrictions on that, I would hope, but or an FAQ saying that 500 point is supposed to include all reserves, but currently it does not. What else do we got here? Cover. Cover does not give, if you have a 3-up save and you're getting shot by an AP0 weapon, you don't get cover to go to a 2-up. The only way you get a 2-up from cover is if you had if the only way you get a 2-up in cover is if you had a 2-up to begin with, and they're shooting you with a -1 weapon, then it goes to AP. Then you turn it to AP0 with cover, or basically you get a +1 to your save, so you cancel out the AP1, and you would still get your 2-up. But no more of a Marine getting shot, a regular Marine in power armor getting shot in cover, getting a 2-up save. They will just get a 3-up. On Terminators, as long as you're shooting them with -2, will go to a 3-up. Hills, containers, sealed buildings, things like that. If you're on top of them, you cannot have your base overhanging the edge. You have to be able to fit your whole base on, otherwise you can't go up there. Woods and craters, looks like they no longer have a movement penalty, and woods no longer are -1 to hit. They are just regular cover now. And craters still give cover to infantry. Ruins, if you're in a ruin and you're shooting something that's more than 6 inches below you, you get +1 AP. So basically from shooting higher up, you get +1 AP. And the same with ruins. If you're on higher levels beyond the bottom floor, you must have your whole base on there. If you have an unbased model, this is the same with the hills and crates and stuff. Every part of the model that would touch the ground, if it was on ground level, must touch the floor or hill or ruin you're on, or it can't go up there. Aircraft. Our aircraft is going to be a whole thing. I got to pull that up and look at this. All right, so aircraft have to be deployed in reserve if they're in aircraft mode. Aircrafts have a minimum movement of 20, but no max movement. After they have moved at least 20 inches, then they can do a turn, not before, and they can turn up to 90 degrees. If at the end of their movement, if their movement would take them off the table, they just go into strategic reserve and will come back. What else? Still can't charge them unless you have fly. You can ignore them in the movement phase and stuff, charge phase, as long as you don't end in engagement range with them. You can move over their base and stuff. But then now you get hover. Some aircraft have hover listed in their ability, so they have to have their hover ability. Basically, you declare it at the beginning of when you're deploying, basically, that they're in hover. Their movement characteristics is moved to 20 inches max, and they can't leave hover. There's no switching between hover each level. They don't automatically go in reserve, so you can deploy them regular, but they lose the aircraft keyword. So that means they're going to be able to be charged regularly by normal stuff because you're hovering down to the ground. So to remove all the aircraft restrictions on yourself, you have to come to hover, which means you can be interacted with by all the stuff on the ground. They can't move past you, so you could move block it with it at this point, but you will be able to be charged by everything. And anything else? No, that's pretty much all the stuff. Main changes on aircraft. Objective markers. You can't end your move on an objective marker anymore. So minor change is something to pay attention to. And they don't give us the actual full missions in here, but that is the main changes. So some of it I like. The opponent fighting first in the first step of the fight phase, I'm not a big fan of, but that's because I like playing combat armies. If you play a defensive combat army, that's good for you. Or something like Slaanesh that just has fight first everywhere. But yeah, that's the basics. Didn't want to make this too long, so didn't go through every single detail in the book because a lot of it is basically the same as last edition. But whenever we get the main mission cards and stuff in hand or leaked, I will break down the mission cards, and should have another Fact and Focus coming out later today. But hope you guys have a good day, and catch you later.